online and presuming. Welcome to the full council meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council on Thursday, the 15th of February, first one of the year. So welcome everyone. I have two apologies from Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Tucker. There are no other further absences or apologies. Do I have any leave of absence requests?
First and second of May. Yes.
Barry?
The 18th to the 26th of March.
Thank you. Any further leaves of absence requests? None. Well, I move that the apology from Councillor Ferguson and Tucker be accepted and the request for leave of absence from Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Bruce be approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Which one was it? Kevin, thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Motion carried. Declarations of conflict of interest.
There's a in the CEO report, item number 3. There's a conflict that I have there with the Chamber of Commerce submitting on Project Manawa. I was just wondering whether I'm happy to speak to it as that item comes up later. If you're happy with that.
Noted that down. I think that's
It's more for me to add some context to it.
That's fair enough.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
Do you want to note a conflict of interest because it may be recorded at this point?
No.
That's, I'm happy to speak to it at that point.
Speak. Okay, thank you. Matters lying on the table. There are no matters lying on the table. Special announcements. There are no special announcements. Public forum. Yeah. Welcome. 3 minutes when you're ready.
My name is Pierre Marasti, and I'm speaking on behalf of Extinction Rebellion. As expected, 2023 was the warmest year on record. And this year, January was the warmest January on record, while the last 12 months were averaging for the first time above the 1.5 degree limit. As a reminder, 1.5 degree was the limit set by the Paris Agreement that we are supposed to strive to never reach this century. It is 2024, and we are already here. There are things that cannot be undone. Breaking this limit will have consequences. On some level, we have already failed. Because of our refusal to reduce our emissions, we will lose many ecosystems, millions of humans will die, and our civilization will suffer the consequences of our inaction. This is not a prediction for some time in the far future. It is already happening today and has been for some years. But because of our failure to act, the deaths of our ecosystems will keep accelerating. The human death toll, we have covered extensively in our previous speeches, will keep accelerating, and our civilization will keep suffering from the economic impact and from the mass population displacements created by climate change. Now, if we're still bothering to come here, it is because the situation can and will become much worse than it already is, unless we take meaningful actions. At this point, though, it is my belief that only a large grassroots fossil fuel boycott movement can move the needle fast enough to improve a possible outcome. The situation today is this one. Even being warned that fossil fuels would destroy our world for 40 years, broadly speaking, no one so far has taken responsibility for their actions. Countries have been blaming other countries, industries have been blaming other industries, and rich Westerners have been blaming richer people than them, or the government, or the industries for their own polluting habits. This vicious cycle needs to be broken, and it can only be broken if enough of us individuals decarbonize our lives. Not just because when you decarbonize, you stop emitting greenhouse gases, but also because when doing so, you stop financing the most polluting industries in the world. And because only when enough of us won't be dependent on fossil fuels anymore, there will be some real pressure for politicians to start phasing out their use. Grassroots boycott will be the theme of our campaign this year, because the climate collapse is our problem, and if we don't fix it, no one else will. This includes, of course, the individuals, the politicians, and the business people in this room. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, good.
It's me. Try to make it amazing.
Well, it's cycling, Julie explained.
Cycling through the rain, I tell you.
When you're ready.
Thank you. Kia ora, councillors. Today, I'd like to ask you to add one more sentence to your resolution on agenda item 1, that council will undertake full consultation with the community before any commitment is made to progress stage 2 of the arterial project. Because in light of the almost tripling of costs of stage 1 and warnings that this might not be the end of the blowout, now is the time for councillors to seriously question the adequacy of your advice and whether you should spend much more than that again to reach what could be only no and low growth areas. We can understand councillors rushing through stage 1 as a shovel-ready project when your official reports told you the required budget would be covered by the government funding. Today, some might be ruining that decision. But I believe it was fundamentally wrong for council to also use this COVID fast-track process to push through consent for stage 2 without any opportunity for public input. This includes consent to demolish Queenstown Memorial Centre. Somehow the application writers considered no one would be affected enough to justify consultation. Really? Would none of us be affected by the demolition of Queenstown Memorial Centre, the RSA rooms, the rugby club rooms, squash club rooms, and the sunny viewing platform of the Memorial Sports Ground, the only place where spectators stand on a winter afternoon? Because the demolition of all 5 vital community resources has been given consent through your action of putting through consent for stage 2 of the arterial. Surely our whole community will be affected. Today, you have the opportunity to ensure our community is asked whether we want, need, or can afford this proposal and its huge collateral damage. Constrained roading funding should be spent where most needed to reduce congestion and carbon and to improve public and active transport options. High traffic demand is not out west, it's to new subdivisions to the south and east, and will increasingly be so. It's there that transport funds should be spent. We have never been given adequate rationale for the enormous costs of the bypass, including its huge collateral damage. Building and celebrating community is one of the goals in QLDC's 2050 vision document. Demolishing these 5 affordable and popular community gathering places is surely the antithesis of this. Further, I've not seen any acknowledgement in any council report that Queenstown Memorial Centre is listed as a significant strategic asset in council's significant engagement policy. Under council's own rules, this means that its sale, lease or transfer should trigger, in fact must trigger, a special consultative procedure. Surely its total demolition would require this level of community consultation. Wanaka Airport is also a strategic asset. The High Court overturned QAC's lease on that because of council's inadequate consultation. Is there a lesson to be learned here? There is at least one option that your official reports ignore should stage 2 and 3 of the arterial ever be justified. Both Peter Hansby and Ulrich Glasner have confirmed in the past that stage 2 could be routed over the whole road by this building when it is replaced and demolished. Peter told Gillian McLeod and I in front of Tony Pickard that the reason he didn't suggest this was he didn't want to pick another fight with the community by proposing to chop down the protected tree in the car park. This is not an adequate reason to instead demolish such treasured community assets, especially without community consent. They may not be salubrious, but they exist and they're well used, they're well loved, and they're affordable community gathering places. Councillors, please use your powers today to ensure our community does have its democratic right to input to this major decision on the fabric of our town and community. It will take just one sentence. And I add, in light of the appalling treatment of consultation that I wrote to you about last night, respectful, transparent, and full presentation of those submissions once received. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you. We're already 3 minutes. Right. Confirmation of the agenda. I move that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Lisa. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion carried. Confirmation of minutes of meeting of the held on the 14th of December 2023. Do I have a mover?
Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. Seconder. Thank you, Mel. All those in favour? All those against? None. 18. Councillor Leavenworth. Right. First item 1. Page 14 of your papers, councillors. We have with us Tony Avery, Jeff Husband from the Alliance, and Jeff Raymond online. Thank you, Jeff. Now, Jeff's got a time limit of He's got to get away to a funeral at 1:45.
Quarter to two.
Yeah, Tony, so,
He's presently coming to us from a small office back of the venue, so.
okay. So thank you, Jeff. What we plan to do is put a short presentation from Tony and then we'll open up for questions after that. Over to you, Tony.
I'm now turning to my trusted assistant, who's, so we thought, usually when we present reports, we talk to it. I thought it'd be useful to quickly run through the nature of the report just to set the scene, because it's quite a complex report. So, this is about just running through the report itself. So what you have before you is a request for increased funding. So be aware that in April 2023, you increased the budget by 20.61 million to 108 million. That's been adjusted through the annual plan. It's now 110.37. This meeting, we're seeking approval for a budget increase of a further 17.65 million, bring it to a revised total budget for council of 128. So the council report includes two options. One option being to approve revised budget of 128, and the report details the rationale for that. Option two is to not approve the additional budget, and that would necessitate the alliance effectively de-scoping the work and providing for structured demobilisation of the project at the most practical point. And the report goes on to identify that. The report includes a full alliance Aotearoa report. We asked Ed and his team to produce a report that was attached, which outlines from the alliance point of view the rationale for the increases since that previous January 2023 reforecast, and also to identify the impact on the Aotearoa project if additional funding is not available. It's important, we thought, in terms of understanding what before you, what happens if the answer is if your decision is not to fund, so that it's clear. We've also included the redacted council report from April 2023 that had been dealt with and public excluded back then. We've redacted a couple of commercially sensitive bits, but that's also attached because that provides some other background to this proposal that was request here. We also sought a legal review of the options open to council. That's also attached to that report, or to this report, sorry. So in terms of the status, 54% of construction is complete. That's described more fully in the Alliance report. Still 46 to be dealt with. A projected spend of $40 million per month. Target opening December 24, so December of this year. Remaining works to be completed by March. And the report identifies what those other works are, which the stormwater under across Stanley, those sorts of things. The report tries to paint a clear picture of the status of the current project and what would happen. Next one. So the report also notes what's driven the changed reforecast since that the January 2023 report, which was reported in the April report to council. So from the Alliance report, and even better talk to this, we've now got full market rates in for the works. There's high levels of cost escalations experienced. The risks have now materialised. Contingency is insufficient. Much more complex construction methodologies, changes to temporary traffic management. The cost increase is increased to that 97 million, which is a $16 million increase. So the options are to approve the revised budget and report notes what that might mean. So what would mean works proceed, activities will be completed, operational by December, other works by March 2025, and maintains the existing $50 million of CIP funding, which was provided. But it also notes that further constrains our finances, reduces council's ability to deal with other projects, and still cannot rule out further increases in funding as the uncertainty is still there. There is a component of contingency both in the Alliance numbers and council's numbers, so there is some provision, but we can't sit here and give you an absolute guarantee on that. The second option is to not approve additional budget. That would mean obviously no additional funds required, would require a prioritisation of the works. That would mean stage one would not be completed. There is a risk of CIP funding for the CIP funding agreement and possible repayment of that. costs associated with restarting in the future. This option 2 is based on the assumption that if you don't increase funds now, that council will need to come back at some future date and complete the works. So there's likely to be increased costs. In the meantime, the work site will be left uncompleted, which has health and safety, community and operational issues, and there's potential for reputational harm. So these are covered off in more greater detail in the Alliance report and in the council report itself. And schematically, you'd end up in this sort of picture with the Frankton Road, Melbourne Street on the left-hand side there, the bit in between not being completed, Henry Street and Gorge Road completed and open. And for those that were able to attend the walkover on Monday, you recall that I in particular was pointed out where what that might look like. We do note that in terms of if you decide on option 2, you would need to work with the Alliance to come back with the fine details of how that would actually be left, how we maximise what we can, but recognising that that bit in between will not be completed. I would note when it says enclosed, obviously we'd also need to make sure that any existing access to any properties is maintained, which would also be required as part of that. And last slide is this is how we deal with it financially, and Stu Burns can talk to this. This is all information that's contained within the report, and that is my story. That is my picture.
Thank you, Tony. I'll open it up to questions. Now, Jeff's online, so questions.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a number of questions. Firstly, for the benefit of the constituents of the Upper Clutha, this might be to Mike initially, can you confirm that the rating impact of this is borne by the Wakatipu ward transport rate primarily, and some of the Wakatipu ward 3/4 rating?
Yeah, there's no rating impact on the Upper Clutha.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point. There is a misconception around that in the Upper Clutha, which is good to clarify. Secondly, I really struggle with this because, yeah, I suppose trying to manage risk and trying to manage exposure for our ratepayers. I mean, firstly, I suppose, can you name the Alliance board members for me? The current Alliance board members. I wasn't able to find that online most recently.
Yeah, so there's a representative from each organisation. So one from Fulton Hogan, one from Downer, one from Becker, one from WSP, and then there's 2 each from the owner participant, which is QLDC and the agency.
I understand that structure. I mean, who are they specifically?
A name, Andrew Johnson, who's our general manager, major projects nationally for Fulton Hogan. Tony Pike, same role in a Downer capacity. Andrea from Becker, and Simon Robertson, WSP.
I'll signal that moving forward, I think we'd need to have a greater relationship with the Alliance board, and we need to meet with them. Certainly, as we do with the QAC or other boards that we're involved in, that we need that. There has to be some accountability, and there has to be some relationship there to hang our hat on. Secondly, is that last year we sought a review of the Alliance in order to understand some of the risks and lessons learned from that. And it's very difficult. I suppose, when is that review available to us, and why isn't it available before this decision before us today?
So it's currently in preparation. We expect that to be complete either by the end of the month or early in March. We had, as council knows, a number of delays in actually finding an appropriate person to undertake that work. We obviously secured that person. That's underway at the moment.
So is there another option before us that we wait for the outcome of the review before making this decision? As if we leave this on the table and make sure that we've done due diligence on around the Alliance
Yeah, I mean, that's a choice council make. It's not a choice we would recommend. I mean, the review is very much around the lessons learned, as we've said. They can inform how council wants to relate to the alliance going forward in the future, and you signal sort of your desire to see a closer board level relationship with council. I don't think that's material, or that's not determinative of this decision. So I think this decision can continue to be made as I think the report outlines. If we continue to delay the decision, then obviously we run the risk of the project stalling and stopping and failing.
Okay, and the final one, you know, clearly last year, I think it was April last year, there was a previous funding increase. Was April, was it? So at that time, you know, one of the main reasons given was that the level of detailed design available earlier was 30% previously. At last year, it was, you know, 80 to 100% detailed design, and that we were, while there was the possibility of increases, that we've sort of said we've got a lot more certainty now. Now, at this point, we're still faced with a situation where we're going, well, we've got more certainty, but you know, it could and probably will come back for further increases down the track. How do we manage that risk? And you know, what we need is certainty, and to manage the risk to our ratepayers. How do we go, well, this is it. This is the final cost to complete the project. You know, can we have establish a fixed price to finish, and give us the certainty to remove that risk from the table?
So we're not in a position to establish a fixed price. That would be a change in the current contract relationship. So we'd have to break one contract and enter another one. So the alliance is a live contract, and that's the basis under which we're working. We have continued, obviously, to narrow the scope. So as every element of design and construction goes forward, the alliance is effectively narrowing the scope. So the range of potential, I suppose, variance is reduced, but I think we're being realistic in saying we cannot confirm that is that, you know, that there'll be no more changes, because there are still some unknowns to the alliance, and Ed might be able to comment on that. We, the alliance and ourselves, continue to carry contingency, and we have increased the contingency to sort of anticipate potential unforeseen circumstances. I mean, the only, you know, it's possible to raise the level of contingency, but that would simply end up actually at this point costing us more.
Just one final thing that, you know, and I'll just signal this, that one of the uncertainties is putting the stormwater drain under this tree, and at face value that seemed mad that that there isn't another solution to that, and that is a high risk, high exposure problem that, you know, we just can't carry. I mean, it clearly, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but that seems madness to me, to be putting a pipe under a giant tree. So anyway, I'll just signal that. This is really tough for us. I mean, the issue was raised about reputational risk. The reputational risk exists for all the members of the alliance, and all the board members of the alliance, and for us as council. And you know, we have to find a way forward to finish the project, but also do the right thing by our community.
Questions?
Oh, just a couple of questions. To follow on question on the review, you said you've finally secured someone, probably. Who's doing the review?
So the review's being undertaken by Mr. Dave Thrash. Dave is highly experienced in alliances, having been involved with NZTA in the past, having been involved with MFE, having been involved with the Sarah work in Christchurch. He was most recently the chair of the Get Wellington Moving program for the previous government until the current government canned it. We had been in dialogue with Dave before that project was stopped, but that project having lost that project, that gave them some additional capacity to get on with this site.
Okay, second question, following on a little bit from what Brendan asked, on para 27, I know the lessons learned and the review will cover a lot of this stuff, but you've got some comments in here about assessments on setting prices and that, but in here it talks about, back in 12 months ago, the final design has been requalified, not all components have been priced at current market rates. Why would you not do that in an update like 12 months ago, rather than based on older rates with inflation? Why wouldn't the team go at market rates 12 months ago?
Because we get throughout the life of the project, when you get going, you start your procurement immediately. And at that point, but over 12 months ago, the final design was through. It had been requantified, and where we can immediately, we are going into the market and procuring. But some elements were just yet to be procured. Some subcontractors were yet to be procured, and it's just a function of time to do so.
Okay. And the other thing that's mentioned throughout the report, which I was involved in the early stages of this project, but it mentions sometimes scope changes asked for by QLDC. Is there any more information? What sort of things were we talking about there that would have been scope changes to affect the project?
Scope changes asked for. I can't off the top of my head remember what those ones were.
That's all right. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just mentioning the report.
Yeah, you do get during the course of a project when you're building something, you'll find something you didn't know before.
Okay.
So then you sort of come back to the owner and you say, look, this is different to the scope. What would you like to do? There's a decision-making process. But there haven't been scope requests that I can recall that are of any great magnitude.
And the main one was Suburb Street Stormwater. We brought that one forward and to put that one into the alliance model.
Right, okay, yeah. So it's sort of predating the alliance formation, yeah.
Yeah, and the last question I've got, Chair, page 36 report, the alliance report talks about just a little table full of possible savings. You know, they're not high value, but they still come to about $1 million. If we approve this today and the money comes in, do we still look at any of these possible savings? You know, like whether we do the shift wall or stormwater or understanding street, things like that. Do we move straight into doing all this, or do we still consider some of these savings?
They can all still be considered as long as time hasn't expired from when they need to start construction within the program to be built. They are currently in the forecast, and that opportunity exists to remove them. And so we're in discussion with QLDC about that now.
Okay, so that's my okay. So there would be a process after the
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. I guess we get a chance to speak.
Thank you.
Just some clarification, just in the report, there's a few things to note on page 14, but there's not a lot of detail in there. We mentioned the rate, there won't be a rating impact on the Wanaka ratepayers, but it's obvious that there's going to be an impact on the Whakatipu ratepayers. I'm just wondering if we can get some, just for the benefit of the community, what that rating impact would be. Thank you, Stu. And I guess I'm looking for residential and commercial and up rent.
To you, Mr. Chair. As the part of the assumption that we're making in terms of funding this is that we'll have to borrow to do that. So you know, most of the costs relate to debt servicing over a period. For overall, the impact on rates is a lift of 1% for the year. It is all recovered from Whakatipu ratepayers, mostly through the Whakatipu rating rate. 54% of that recovery will come from accommodation and commercial properties, 25% from residential. So for the median value properties, you're looking at around 1% increase. And for commercial accommodation, for median properties, you're looking at 2.3%. So the dollar values of those for residential, median residential, are between $18 and $31 per annum. And for commercial accommodations, a range of 168 to 256. The higher value properties, because that rating rate is a capital value rate, the percentages remain about the same, but the dollar impact obviously is higher. So residential could be up to $112 per annum for the high value residential, and for commercial high value examples around $2,000 increase, and accommodation. High value hotel, for example, would be 6,400.
Okay, and so paid off over, how long are we expecting that?
Well, that calculation was done over 30 years at 5%.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that covers that question unless there's anything else of interest. And the other thing was just noting the contractual obligations to CIP, and we've got some legal advice, and it all speaks to funding risks, but we haven't actually sought a definition of abandonment. I don't know if anything's been discussed over the last 24 hours, but do we understand whether deferring it and propping it up somewhere else in the LTP, whether, you know, 1 or 2 or 5 years away, if we had money in the LTP, would that be considered abandonment, or do we just not know?
I don't think we haven't taken explicit legal advice on that, nor have we sought interpretation by CIP, but there is under the agreement with CIP a time frame in which to complete. Obviously, we have with them that's open to negotiation, but I think the expectation would be that the project is completed, not set aside for 3 to 5 years to be picked up again.
Yeah, thank you. Just noting there's sort of a lack of clarity on some of the points, and it would really help to have, for councils, I think, to have a bit more information when making these decisions. The other question I had was around Ballarat Street stormwater. I was reading some of the stormwater documents, and it seems pretty crucial that we do that piece of work one way or another, even if it does seem mildly unconstructible. But there was also mention of what we needed to do upstream for Horn Creek, because the flows are going to be higher. And so is there some work semi-attached to this project further up Gorge Road that needs to be done? Or, I think that was one option, the other option was building a wall between the road and Horn Creek. I guess what I'm getting at is are there pieces of work that sit outside of this that are actually part of this that we haven't yet budgeted for, that we need to do to protect the community from stormwater overflows?
I don't know the answer to that.
We've asked future capital management planning, and there are allowances there. I don't think all that work is scoped up at the moment, but there's no one thinking for investigation.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Yeah, that's all the questions I had.
Yeah. Lisa?
Thanks. I'd like to ask a couple of questions about our workforce in there. I'm probably thinking back, this came out of a black swan moment, right? Low probability, high consequence. The project was kicked off as a shovel-ready thing in the middle of a pandemic. And we often talk about, does the market have the ability to deliver on the work? So one of the things I'd like our community to understand is some of the complexity that you've had behind mobilising the workforce, understanding that no one had any jobs, no one had any work, there wasn't an immigration department. How many people have you got up there? What are their skills and experience and things? What sort of challenges did you face around that mobilisation and establishment of the project? I suppose where my question's coming from is I'm concerned about our risk of demobilising and our inability to recapture this workforce. Can you describe to me what that's been like? How many you got? What are they like? Where'd they come from?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of parts. So the establishment of the alliance at the outset was challenging insofar as the construction work, which met the CIP funding deadline on the 18th of January 2021, for street upgrades was challenging because it was the middle of the construction season. So at that point, most contractors start filling their order books in the middle of the year for a start, and around about September and away they go. We had to find resource to start in the middle of the season. So there was a challenge getting up and running, but we did. Once that challenge was overcome, it wasn't too bad. Quite lucky at that particular time, Christchurch was winding down from rebuild work, so contractors were looking for work. The market in Queenstown stayed reasonably buoyant at that particular time. Developers were still developing, so the contracting fraternity was reasonably busy. So rather than local subcontractors that we would use, we had to supplement with some coming from out of town. Wasn't a major issue though at that time, and it hasn't really been a major issue for us. You get the odd little peak that you have to manage where you'll have a 2-month period where you need some additional workforce, and so you've got a challenge to find that, and then it'll calm off again and it gets back to a steady state. So we've been reasonably fortunate in being able to find resource. Then we have the management staff. That's always a challenge when you're ramping up. So the first 6 to 12 months of the Alliance ramping up was a challenge because we were sort of quickly going from street upgrades to Lakeview, then to arterial in sort of quick fashion. So you've got to time your engineering management resource coming in from other parts of the country to line up with that. That's always a challenge no matter which project you go to. We've managed to do that. Probably, and then it's been reasonably steady all the way through. Queenstown's an attractive destination for younger generations, sort of the 20s to 40s, those that love going downhill fast on all sorts of things. So we've been able to attract engineering team relatively easily with a wee bit of effort, but it hasn't been super challenging for us. Probably more recently, as the market's become more buoyant around the country, we've seen it's slightly more challenging to find an engineer, for example. There's multiple choices around the countryside now for work. Trek being the latest one on the east coast of the island. A lot of people are enticed by that. It's big and shiny and new. So you're sort of competing with that a wee bit, but still we managed to find people because Queenstown's an attractive destination. In more recent times, what has become challenging is the cost of accommodation and finding accommodation, because that's been challenging for everybody. So that does make people sort of consider a bit more before they come here, but most people are still very keen to get here. So it's been relatively steady with the odd little peak where you've got to try and find additional.
Can you speak about, sorry,
Sorry, Jeff, did you want to say something?
Yes, sorry if I could, Councillor, just sort of add in the part of the situation we were at with, with the shovel red money was a speed to start. That was absolutely critical to CIP. So, we had agreements signed in December and the Alliance were, operating on the ground mid-January. There were also part of the Alliance was the value add, the extra community outcomes we needed. And, critical to CIP. So we've got, when those early stages of COVID, when hospitality was, taking a massive dive, the Alliance and the construction industry put training programs together to, wrong language, but, repurpose, some hospitality into areas. And we've got some really real success stories within the Alliance and people have taken that route.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's correct, Jeff. In the early stages, we had a number of people that came on board with us because they were out of work. And then since the market coming back online again, those people have tended to drift back towards those industries which they prefer to be in. But we have still maintained, we've got one lady with us who's been with us from the start, and it's been a career shift for her, and she's still living.
I think I know the individual you're talking about. Can you speak for a second about workplace staging? When we came on our site inspection the other day, there was a drilling rig, and our community often asks, why isn't there someone working on this bit or this bit? I suppose I compare it to if you're cooking a 10-course dinner, you don't have 10 ovens, but that's staging. And my fear around if we don't progress, how quickly this workforce could scatter and trying to regroup, redeploy. Can you talk about the staging and the risk to loss of deployment?
Yeah, so it is a challenge. At the moment you do let the resource go, it does become harder to get it back. With the physical work delivery, that which is the mobilisation, demobilisation of plant people and subcontractors can manage that. What becomes more challenging is the remobilisation of your management team. So, you know, in the example that you demobilise the alliance, the management team disperses, and then you probably won't get that same management team back in the future. You'll get back a different team. With that comes a loss of knowledge. And then that's when you have challenges, because all the systems and processes in the world still have a lot of IP that resides in the top 2 inches of people. So that is the challenge that you have.
And I understand you need
Sorry,
that.
Lisa,
Sorry.
just before you jump in, I'm just cognizant that we've got 5 minutes left with Jeff.
Chief.
If anyone has any questions for Jeff on contracting stuff, I'll come back to you. Now it's probably.
I don't know if Jeff would answer my question or someone else, but I can raise my question.
Yeah, just go for it, and then we'll come back to you. Sorry, Lisa.
So obviously reconciling the decision to approve this with that community is a pretty hard pill to swallow. We already found ourselves in a position last year, we find ourselves here again, and we might find ourselves here again in the future. Ideally, and a kind of obligation really for governance, is to have the most practical options before us. One could argue that we haven't been given the most practical options. We've been given extreme options. So my question really is, given that, you know, we were here a year ago, and there's been a year between then and now, it's hard for me to understand that maybe 6 months ago or 4 months ago, there wasn't the possibility to kind of mitigate some of the costs at that point. I find it really hard to understand why it's quite rushed now to make this decision, and we don't have any other practical options. So that's what I'm trying to understand is, yes, it's a hindsight question. It's easy to say, well, with hindsight, you know, but there are some decisions that could, from what I've heard on site, that could have been changed potentially that weren't. So I don't understand why we find ourselves here now and not, I guess, 5 months ago. Or...
Yeah, so just speaking from a construction perspective, there's probably limited things to do at all to mitigate cost overruns further, just because of the nature of the job and the fact that it's perched on the side of a hill, and it's a big part of what we're doing is about that link piece with retaining walls. There's a limit to what you can de-scope out of the job before it is not a practical thing to even, you can't operate it.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, Lisa, sorry, apologies. If I could just talk to that, you know, you'll see in the Alliance report, there are cost saving opportunities that have been taken up, have been rejected. Some of that, the ones that were rejected were in the context of having budget in April, 23, and actually thinking we could complete the project and, deliver the outcomes based on that. Ed and the Alliance teams reforecast started somewhere around July, and, it's not a quick process, and Ed can take you through that. But when we became aware of this sort of November and formalised in December, we were keeping that front of mind and advising councillors of that time.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. Lisa?
I'm pretty much done with my questions. Just that bit around the fat tail, I suppose, of going these costs and things that have hit us at the end of it. And that, again, your site visit, thank you to the team for showing us, the extent of the unknowns and what you found when you did ground truth it, and how much didn't match the GAS and all of those bits. I suppose having to report every month that we've got the costs covered to complete mean that if you didn't get a go today, that workforce could disappear really quickly from us, because you do need a clear program and pipeline of work for them, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, Jeff, it is 1:45. I will relieve you of your duties if you have to get away. Oh, you're on mute. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions? No?
No,
Now, I know this is quite a hard one because it's how long is a piece of string? But we have got a note to say that this might not be the last time you come back to us. What's the level of confidence? Like, is everything now priced at current rates? What's the level of confidence that there won't be further adjustments or will be?
Yeah, look, a much higher level of confidence. As confident as you can be without discovering things you just didn't know about. But we're in a situation now where most of the work is coming out of the ground. If you look at the now, you know what stops at the rain, but there's a stormwater pipe going up the middle of the alignment now. That's sort of getting towards the end of the underground works, and that's where in any project we've ever done, anything underground is where you have the most risk and the most uncertainty, and we're coming out of the ground. Our piling team has about, what are we now? We're towards the mid-February, aren't we? So we've got about 6 to 8 weeks of piling left. Once you've done that, there's another piece of in-ground risk that starts to disappear when you're getting out of the ground and you get a lot more certainty. So we every week and day is getting towards that point. We've re-quantified everything. We've priced everything out, been to the market, received prices, things are getting locked in. So a lot of that risk is mitigated now. The biggest thing for us, the biggest enemy is time. You know, if we don't meet certain milestones, time will be the thing that costs us money. If we cannot get the road open, the arterial operational by December, and it drifts on until March, and then there's a final piece of work that happens after that, you know, then time costs money, and that's where we start to spend extra money.
And then you slowly drift into the next construction season.
And that is the constraint down here with the temperature. You've got very defined construction periods with respect to pavement construction. Yeah, so you have to hit your dates.
Hang on. Sorry. Have you finished?
I'm done.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Barry now, because Barry's been waiting patient.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to give me some clarification, obviously with a project like this, there's been some unexpected surprises and no doubt a lot of underground infrastructure that at some point in the future would have needed to be upgraded. Can you give us an indication of what percentage of the project has been applied to those unexpected surprises that is actually future-proof underground infrastructure that would have needed replacing at some stage in the future?
Yeah, but I know exactly what you're asking, and I don't know the answer to it right now. And it's something we could estimate, but with the way in which the work is done, is scheduled out, and then built, a lot of that is within prices that we've got. So we would have to go through quite a bit of analysis. You could get an approximation, but it wouldn't be exact.
Would it be a significant portion of the overall budget?
Would it be? It would be significant. I just don't know how significant.
Matt?
I can go first?
No, you Matt.
So a lot of the additional costings in this budget are sort of hard infrastructure. And for me, and excuse me for not being an infrastructure expert here, but traffic management is probably one that the public's going to look at and go, why is there 2 million extra on traffic management? Can you speak to why there's a cost escalation with that? Is it just a timing thing with delays and that, or is that such a hard thing to pin down that it fluctuates with everything else?
Yes, so it does fluctuate a little bit. The challenge that we've found is and Queenstown's slightly unique in this regard, especially once visitor numbers started to increase. Not a lot of tourists walking around, and they walk around looking at the view, and they don't look at where they're going. Certainly don't follow signs. So the challenge that we've had is people just walking wherever they feel like throughout the site. So to control that is people. So that's why you see a lot of people with high-vis vests on directing the public on where to go. So a lot of the cost increases are around the cost of people doing the traffic management work, the pedestrian management work, and then it's a function of time as well. So the longer you're on the job for, you need those people there for that same duration to control pedestrians. And one of the things we've found recently is that the code of practice has gone from a very prescriptive code, you must do this to comply with the situation, to a risk-based process. People see risk in a different way, and we get audited as to our performance on a regular basis. And what we were finding, our audit scores were starting to drop based on the perceived risk by the auditor. So to deal with that was to mitigate that risk, which is to in Queenstown context, the way to do that is to increase the personnel presence to control intersections. It's a constant challenge, it's a constant tension. It's one we've been focused on for a long time, but we've been here for 3 years now, and we can't reduce the numbers because we see the result of reducing people on the ground. You then get more incidents happening, and the last thing anyone wants is is an unfortunate incident between a pedestrian and a road side.
So just one last question. What I'm trying to have in my mind at the moment is if we stopped it and we finished with someone else under another contract, what would the benefits be of not carrying the management structure? When I was on site the other day, the number of people working on site was pretty limited. But in the background, the management structure is sort of sitting at 98 people or something. It was pretty large from the graph. So, you know, one of the benefits of staying with the Alliance is nobody's making any profit anymore. With the new contract. They want to make a profit, right? So there'd be that increase. But on the flip side, we've got all the IP, you know, we've got all the design, we've got a lot of that expensive stuff that's already been done at the end of it. Would stopping the contract now, and look, I don't expect you to answer. So that's maybe one of the staff answer, but if we stopped now and procured again with the management structure under a new contract, given the IP that we've got from the Alliance already, would it be small enough to make a significant difference in what we're paying? Like, are we carrying too many expensive people at the moment?
So I suppose
enough to make a difference.
Yeah, I suppose that on the numbers of people are for the Alliance as a whole. So which includes the Transport Agency work as well, which is getting prepared for a construction start in April. So you've got a team that's across everything. So yeah, right now when you look at the work that is completed, so street upgrades is complete. Lakeview is weeks away from being complete, which leaves from a QLDC perspective just the arterial. But when the work finishes, there's a tail of closing out those projects, and that takes time, and so that takes people to do that. And then the 98, I'm not quite sure where the number comes from. That's not the number that's full time managing the job. We're in a situation where we've probably got in the order of somewhere between 40 and 60 managing the Alliance at any one time. So that's where that sits. With respect to shutting down and starting up again, haven't been involved in that before, but like you say, yeah, I do pretty well. You spend more money because someone else that you do time would want to do it in fee.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what that difference might be, and whether staff have looked into that at all.
No, we haven't looked at that, and we've given advice. I think it's covered in the report that paying a choice that should also raise procurement risk. It also create risk of someone else coming in and picking up the Alliance. There's a whole lot of unknowns around that may or may not mean that final cost will be greater or less than what the Alliance can do.
So we don't know because we haven't.
And there's also time frame as well.
Kevin?
Yeah, I've got a handful of questions. Just to go back to see the recommendation has on point number 3A that the budget, the adjusted budget for 2023-24 becomes 198 million. I know the Alliance report talks about the construction cost of 97. And then I know our total budget we're talking about also in that same resolution is 128. I'm just wondering where the extra 70 million, what that relates to.
Oh, that's sorry. Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of confusion there with that number. That number relates to the QLDC total program.
Total program which covers other work
or CapEx. It's not this project. It's the total program.
Okay. I also was wondering, so between April last year, obviously prior to April last year, there was a reforecast, and then again prior to where we are today, no other reforecasts in between those. I mean, from what Jeff said, it takes a number of months to prepare that.
Yeah, so that first reforecast was a full reforecast based on the requantification of the whole job, which was quite a time-consuming thing. And then the second full reforecast was based on procurement of all outstanding work, and then a re-estimation of the methodology and making sure we've got that covered. So that process is done. but there's an iterative ongoing monthly process that we go through where we look ahead, check how we're going on. This is what we assumed cost to be. This is what we spent in the month versus what we planned to spend. Is there a difference there? Why? And then looking forward on a monthly basis as to the costs remaining. Does that match the remaining? So there's an iterative monthly process.
So does that then feed information back to QLDC? Because I noticed one of the funding agreements is that each month QLDC must confirm it has the funds to complete. I'm wondering what that decision or that confirmation is based on each month.
So when we have what we call a cost to complete process that happens at a set time every month. Once we've completed that information goes into the board pack. That comes through to the board members, which includes QLDC. Information gets fed through the organisation.
So the most recent one of those then before the reforecast came out, did that still have numbers that satisfied QLDC that we had funds in the budget to complete the project?
Yes, it was based on the previous forecast that in the approved budget that was in April 2023. It was only in, I suppose, in terms of the December board report that started to signal change. So up until that point, we've been working within the budget as per the April 2023.
Right. So at some point, presumably towards the end of last year, we went from 1 month where we thought we've got enough money in the budget. Next month, we realised we needed another 16, 17 million to initiate. Page 17. Page 17 talks about the key dates for the project. The one key thing that's missing from there is December 2022 when we were asked to reduce the scope of the project to say what we thought at the time was enough money to finish the project, which was only about $3 million by removal of the overpass. Seems relatively short time later, we were then being asked for another $20 million. My concern, having reflected on that decision with a bit more experience, was that I'm not convinced that that decision was adequately thought through to remove that overpass in terms of meeting the decision-making requirements of the Local Government Act and the consultation of people that were affected by that. But that, to me, that stood out as being something that was missing from that summary of key dates. And again, just the time frame between that, but I assume that reforecast that happened prior to April took place after that overpass removal.
Yeah, I can't recall the exact timing of all of that. It was all sort of playing out at the same time. Yeah, the exact dates we've got the history there if need be, but I can't remember.
So my involvement started in January
after that
2023. Yeah, we were presented with request to increase the budget by that 20 million. The decision to remove the bridge had been made before that at some point. So how those two are connected, I can't tell you. But it was that was the sequence. And
then page 18 at the top of the page, it talks about the TOC of $70.1 million. It's unclear to me when that figure was arrived at. My understanding was that the original cost of the project, or cost to complete it, was $49.5 million. I'm not sure what was in the original alliance agreement.
Yeah, so there's probably a joint answer here. So the TOC of 70 target outturn cost that was agreed in 2021.
It's there on page 17.
Yeah, so it was around 21, but then the number that you're talking about, I think, is a previous QLDC budget, I believe.
My understanding, unfortunately, Jeff isn't here, but my understanding is that an earlier figure was a holding position in the annual plan and long-term plan. But the final TOC hadn't been determined. It was subsequent to that, is my understanding. So there was an initial figure, which was a holding figure. Then the TOC was confirmed, and that was the sort of the start point before they were confirmed and agreed to TOC, is my understanding.
Okay. So yeah, I do have a note that the 21 to 31 long-term plan had a provisional budget of 49.5, but I wasn't sure whether something I'd read earlier made it sound like that was what was the agreed price at the start of the actual contract.
Yeah, the way in which the program alliance agreement works, when we first started, nothing was in there. And then as each work package came online, the TOC was agreed, the alliance agreement is varied with that new one. So the alliance agreement wasn't varied with TOC 3 until sometime May 21.
Right. Because I don't think, as a group of councillors, I don't think we've seen or had the opportunity to see the alliance agreement. So I was presuming that there will be a figure that was in that signed executive agreement.
No, there's not. No,
Right.
no.
Okay. A couple more, page 21. Page 21, I just have a query there. It talks about the considering it. So item 32B, Melbourne Street underground scope complete, and it says downslope 90% complete, including final hashed layer, but that final layer is not constructed yet, is it?
Yes, correct.
It's excluding that.
Yeah, so the reason for that is just to get a quality of finish. So when you go up Melbourne Street, you'll see there's 60 mils.
We talked about that.
We talked about that, didn't we? Yeah.
So I just wanted to, so that's maybe a typo in the report here that says included.
Yeah.
Melbourne underground skip, downslope, including final asphalt layer. Yeah, that's a typo.
Yeah. Because the intention is not to finish that until later.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, the other concern I have is down the bottom of that page, it talks about the works being complete to approximately 54% complete by value of construction. In April last year, the figure that we had in the report was that it was at 40%. That indicates that there's only been 14% more achieved in a year, 10 months. And also raises a flag that there's 46% more to complete, most of that in the next 10 months in the same time frame.
Yes.
There's a bit of a mismatch in my mind.
So first question, I could pick up that 40% was based on the original forecast when it was sitting, whenever that number was sitting. Right. And then since the final number's gone up, then the percentage controls down. Yeah. And then sorry, the second part of your question was
percentage to complete, 46% to complete.
Yeah, so that's moved on now. I'm not sure what the percentage is. Since we wrote that report, we've been through 2 months. We in December and January, we've spent testing my memory now, something like $2.5 to $3 million a month for the last 2 months. So that percentage has certainly shifted. With the total, the final work is programmed to be complete in March next year. So we've got 13 months remaining in the order of $45 odd million, I think. So I'm not sure what the numbers are.
So when that indicates you need to up the spend, so productivity needs to increase.
Yeah, December and January are always slower months because they're shorter months.
Yeah.
And then the spend's not linear either. It depends on what you're doing. So when you do asphalt, it's high value, short duration. And then the same with retaining wall construction. We're doing piling at the moment, which is quite long in duration, but lesser in spend. And then when you start adding concrete into the equation, your spend goes up for the month. So confident we'll make that spend. Yeah, that's a good observation. That's the sort of question we ask ourselves in our monthly costing process to make sure that we're on track with it.
Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ed. Good discussion. Right, we've got a motion before us, and before we start this for the public, we've got an addition to that motion. With replacing 6 and it drops down, the existing 6 becomes 7 and then 7 becomes 8. Do we have that online, or can you bring that up, please, Noel? So that's the bit different from the original paper to the public. So they're before us. Councillors, do I have a mover? Thank you, Barry. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Lyle. Open for discussion. Councillors.
Well, I'd just like to say a few words. I know a lot of my comments are based on hindsight, which is a great thing. And I know we've got the review going on, the lessons learned review going on. A lot of this will be picked up in that. We're going to make sure we do have a really good look at it. But I've always been saying this, I'm pleased we'll be stop calling this a shovel-ready project. I know it's a shovel-ready thing the government put out there, but in hindsight, it wasn't really shovel-ready. And I've been cynically saying, questionable whether the shovel had even been designed. It was all very well rushing to get the government money, and it was a big carrot. But it is a bit of a lesson learned, especially on now that's been reported, the deficiencies in the GIS data in detail. And if you're looking back in hindsight again, we wouldn't be asking 50 million from government. We should have been going for at least 100 million. Following on from what Quinn said, I think some of the reports are pretty sobering. I read through it and then they don't reflect well on a lot of the professionals involved, a lot of the board members, elected members. But we have to, it's history now, we have to accept that and go with it. So we have been burdened with a bit of a project, but I say that not to finish it would be to dig a bigger hole for us now and for the next council, and something I don't support. So I do not believe we should be will achieve anything by delaying, putting it off. We need to get on, get the Star project finished. We've had a briefing on the money. It does have an impact on ratepayers and the Wakatipu, and actually the whole communities throughout the district because of things that flow on from this. So anyway, as I've moved, I've seconded it. But I do say whether we look at doing, still look at the savings on page 36, they might only be small, but I think as we go through the process, we need to look at that. And when we get our lessons learned document or review report back, we really need to take note of it. And once again, learn from it. Thank you.
Any further?
Yeah, yeah, we're in a real bind here because we continue to be wearing the pain of decisions that we're not in control of, and lessons learned will partnerships and collective agreements where we don't have control but have financial risk can't continue. We can't do that anymore. If we're in charge of something, we need to be in charge of it. And we're responsible for it. But anyway, it is what it is. We do need to. I'm disappointed we don't have the review. There's been plenty of time for it, and it would have been incredibly valuable to have it before this decision is made. And as I said, my expectation is that the board front up to council and own some of what's going on. I agree that, unfortunately, this just cannot go unfinished. This project cannot go unfinished, and but I really don't know. I can't reconcile the cost that we're responsible for versus the lack of control that we've had and accountability that we've had on this project. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a really, really hard one because I don't want to not finish the project. I think we have to finish the project. But the option is to finish with the Alliance now or to investigate other options. And given what's on the table, given what we know and what we don't know, which is quite a lot, and given the management overhead that we're carrying, I would like to investigate other options. And obviously option 2 to not complete is not to not complete. It was a raw option to look at other ways of doing things, potentially de-scoping, but it would also give us the option to look at what would be the cost to procure it without that management structure. I'm just looking at the numbers. If you're looking at 60 people, say at $100,000 a year, you're at 6 million just in wages. Fear management overhead. And I know part of that's funded by NZTA, but I don't know the extent to which the delay in the NZTA's work has meant that we're carrying more overhead now than we should be. There's so many questions that are not answered by the paper. And so that's where I'm going, is that I can't approve option 1, and the option 2 leaves me room to look at other things. So that's where I'm headed on this one. Want to complete, it's just how and when and for how much and with who.
Agree with excuse me, my fellow elected members. It's been a really hard one to consider, and I had to come back to an outcome focus. That investment into Queenstown is important and acknowledged, and the only way to stop adding costs to a project is to finish it. And this came about in such a small window. I just keep coming back to what's our buying power in the market. When we talk about going back out there and finding other people, the New Zealand, construction sector is not a big market, and we've got reputational risk. We've got a project to finish. We've got a workforce here. I agree with Councillor excuse me, Bartlett's concerns about the removal of that pedestrian bridge. I'd actually like to see a line item in the LTP that says we aim for outcome focus of completion of stage 1, so we can get the job done and put that bridge back in. But I definitely do not support abandoning it this close and leaving a gravel stretch in the middle of such a significant and key piece of important infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah, just echoing what everyone else has said. It's a really terrible position to be put in again. I feel that as a council, we have all the accountability and virtually none of the control, and it shouldn't be that way. So the way that I see the timing of this, the costs to not do it will be more. And on this occasion, I'm signalling that I will be supporting this. But the learning is for other projects that are similar, where we have to learn from this and not apply the same methodology that we applied this time around. We just cannot afford to not have practical options before us. And yeah, it's a real hate on governance. Thank you.
Yes, echo what a lot of other people have said. This is a hard pill to swallow. I also do not want to see it not completed. So for me, the quicker that it's completed, the better. I'm very supportive of the new 6, which I understand is currently happening anyway. But I think, yeah, going down that route is a very good idea.
Thank you. So, I mean, obviously spent quite a lot of time thinking about this too, as everyone has, but I mean, the position, I guess, where I'm at, last year's increase, you know, I was concerned that we would see more requests, and that's where we're at today. But I think for me, we've talked about options for option 2, you know, to not fund it. But for me, that point of time was in April last year, and you know, it was at that stage then when we could have considered if changes in scope were necessary to be able to successfully complete the project then within the budget that was available at that time. And since joining the council, I've been a bit surprised as to the lack of involvement the council, the elected councils had in the project, in the alliance. And there's, like as Quentin mentioned, there's no relationship between this council and the board really, the elected members and the board. We've had one site visit, which was delayed from last year, but it's only just happened. And it's just surprised me that for a project that's had such a huge impact physically and financially on the community, that we had such little involvement in it. For the most part, the alliance is really, it seems that they've just been left to their own devices, separate from what we see them do. But and the only referring back to us has been when there's been a request to reduce the scope or increase the budget on a number of occasions. But yeah, I mean, unforeseen conditions and cost escalations can go some way towards explaining the increases, but the scale of these increases are, it's hard to accept. And, you know, potentially there were many other things that could have been looked at earlier on in the project to try and manage those, but you know, again, that's the benefit of hindsight, I suppose. The report, we've got 2 options in front of us, but one of those options, option 2, is quite difficult to comprehend, to fully comprehend without significantly more detail, as the others mentioned. And as I said, you know, the time to look at those other options to try and finish the project within the budget was earlier on, was last year, or even earlier than that. In my mind, the works are now at a stage where, one way or another, the full completion of stage 1 of the Aotearoa route will need to be finished, either now or at some stage in the future. And that's, I guess, the decision that we're asking or looking at today. Experience suggests that the most cost-effective way to do that is to carry on with the current agreements, with the expectation that the road will be open before the end of the year and the project completed shortly after that. I remain concerned at the possibility of further increases, as we all are. And I would like to see if there's any way we can have slightly more oversight into that, whether, you know, maybe such as a monthly report to, and this may already happen to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, at least. I've had my concerns, and some of you already know this from the very outset of the project when it was first announced, but well before I was even on this council, about the design and consenting process and about the way construction's progressed. And I'm, as I've said before, I'm yet to be convinced that there'll be any real benefit at the completion of stage one that will outweigh the cost, adverse effects, and the inconvenience that we've all endured over the last 2.5, 3 years. But with the current state that the works are in, I reluctantly, and despite the impact on other projects that will likely need to be deferred as a consequence, or parts of them, I've accepted the need to support the budget increase at this point. Gives the Alliance a clear view to finishing the project without any further delays, and any deferral of that at this point means we run out of construction time this season, and just means there'll be more cost added to it, in my mind.
Thank you. So generally, I would take the view that once we start a project, we must see it through to completion. However, I just get it in general life, there's always a degree of escalation, but you have some sort of certainty around that escalation. Throughout this project and my time on council, the Alliance has not given us that, and thinking that this has happened now twice to us, the likelihood that it happens again is probably quite high, which makes our decision today extremely difficult. And I'm probably still in two minds. I echo exactly what the rest of the councillors are saying here, and this is not an easy decision for us because we know we're going to get it in the end. I guess going forward, if this budget is approved, then we must seek further financial and project delivery detail from the Alliance so that we're not blindsided by this again, and we can actually justify this, because right now it's really difficult for us to do that.
Before we put to the vote, before I allow you your right reply, Barry, I think what's missing here, and I'm going to be straight with you here, Councillor Ferguson's not here. Councillor Ferguson took it upon himself to visit the affected parties, and I also thank Councillor Bartlett for attending on one of those occasions. And so this is his thoughts on it. I've made 3 visits to affected accommodation providers and a resident who has been behind the cage for over 2.5 years in the past 6 months. On one visit, I was joined by Councillor Bartlett. I was appalled at the apparent lack of duty of care for residents directly affected by this project. To have managers and others nearly in tears, relaying stories of constant bad reviews, guests walking out in the middle of the night, demanding refunds, diminishing bookings, the constant vibration of the buildings, lack of sleep, lack of communication, and the blocking of their access way by night worker vehicles, I found very confronting. To be told your water or power was going to be turned off at 9 AM and nothing happens, to be told we are not sure when it will happen now, after you're prepared for guests, shows no empathy or concern and care for those affected. The stress and anxiety on the businesses and the residents, let me tell you, has been immense. I apologise for not being here in person, but in my absence, I felt their voices needed to be heard. And as the project hopefully nears its end later this year, and the Alliance move on to the Frankton Roundabout project, and as a representative of our people, we all hope that lessons have been learned. And I felt I had to read that out because I think the voices of those people affected by this construction has been tough on them. I think their voices should be heard. So I know it's a tough decision, councillors, but I look forward to December this year when this project is complete for the arterial, and then March 2025. So from my point of view, we have to get this done. We have to get it done as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, councillors, unless you want to say something, Barry? No, maybe. Okay, I'll put it to the vote. So we've got a mover and we've got a seconder. We've got the motion before us. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? Nikki, do you want to record it?
Yeah, recorded.
Okay, thank you, team. Great discussion, councillors. Tough decision. Thank you.
Thank you. The next stage.
Item 2, long-term plan 2024-34 deferred adoption. Page 62 of your papers, councillors. Looking at Caleb, it's not. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
Megan.
Hello, good afternoon, your worship councillors. We're happy to take the report as read and answer questions. There's just one thing I wanted to clarify. Councillors will be aware, and the throngs of the community who are online watching us now may be aware that in the draft legislation there is another option being put forward, which is to defer for 12 months. I just wanted to let you know that our recommendation from officers remains the same, and our Chief Executive is really happy in the course of the discussion to answer any questions and clarification. I also wanted to take this opportunity to highlight a couple of important things to our community, and that's just to reiterate that in the event that you choose to agree the recommendation, the new consultation dates would begin 28th June and conclude 29th of July. So that would be the new period for submissions. What we will be proposing to take out of that, as outlined in the paper, and undertake as a separate process, will be on the same time frame as the normal 10-year plan timeframe, i.e. April, to consult on fees and charges and community grants. I mention community grants because I know that's one that your community will be deeply interested in. The process will continue. It will be somewhat changed. There's more to come on that, but I just wanted to reassure the community that the dates of those two processes would go ahead at the normal time and will be undertaken during April. Other than that, we're going to answer any questions.
Questions, councillors?
I've got the editorial, another resolution note 1 spelled Simeon's name wrong.
Did you do?
Simon
Simeon instead of Simeon, that's all right. I put it down to the old auto-corrected word.
I'll take that one.
So just to clarify, so obviously we're stepping outside of an annual process, which will mean the setting of the rates and the fees and charges and things like that will be out of step with our financial year. Maybe Stu could just speak to the impact of that.
To be honest, there shouldn't be too much impact by bringing the fees and charges process, or retaining the current timetable for fees and charges. We're able to offer the community an opportunity to engage on those proposals, and that the outcome of that process will actually feed into the LTP, albeit later. The rates issue means that there will probably be a slight delay to the issue of invoices, but not significant, talking a matter of weeks. And we will be doing that work in parallel rather than sequentially, which is the normal.
And the downside of taking the other option in terms of doing an annual plan this year, and that, you know, are there additional complexities in doing a long-term plan in an election year?
I think there are a number of additional complexities with from our perspective gain, because we still have to do an annual plan for this year. We would still basically be doing a number of the steps towards an LTP, but not doing a formal LTP. What delaying it by a year will do will effectively not enable us to restructure the capital budget to really take account of our Three Waters obligations. So we've been working towards that. We've been working towards that in the council. We're finalising the technical details of that, and I think just setting it out for another 12 months effectively simply compromises our ability to get on and deliver that significant Three Waters change.
All right, I'll just signal that. There've been a number of curveballs that have been thrown at this council since this council was elected. Financial curveballs, the leaky homes claim, the promise of Three Waters going away, the promise of Three Waters coming back, escalations in a number of sectors that, you know, have put us in my time, I think it's 6 or 7 years on council, is the most difficult financial position that I've seen by a long shot. And we are, and this is the latest of a number of the curveballs, and that we are facing a decade of potentially eye-watering rates increases and costs associated with Three Waters. And we continue to look to government to help us solve that problem. It's not going to solve the problem by slicing the pie a different way, by assaulting our ratepayers. We need to continue to look to other revenue streams like the visitor levy to help us with this story, and we also need to look to government to continue to help us to solve this problem. And just allowing us to borrow more money is not going to do that. So they need to help us by putting some more money on the table.
I also think probably you should also recognise the work that councillors have done to, long-term start to reduce the debt load, increase the amount of headroom we've got for unexpected calamities, if that's the right word. So, we are, as well as the challenge in front of this council, which I think this council has grasped, was actually growing that investment pie, but also ensuring that it maintains a level of prudency in the way that it does that.
Yeah, and reinforce that point is that any suggestion that we're not looking at every avenue to be fiscally prudent is not recognising the work this council is doing in that avenue, because we are continuing to look. We need to do more, but we are continuing to look where we can save money and where we can reduce the impact on ratepayers.
It's just a really quick comment since we're talking kind of generally about the LTP. I just hope, since we're up against it and rates are going to be going up, I hope we can, in the consultation document, when we work that up, I hope we can put some real options in there for the community so they can actually have a meaningful say on what they might want and what they might not want. And one of those things was mentioned just in the last item, the arterials 2 and 3. Things like that are big issues and they have big funding impacts. And I think those are the sorts of things that we need to be putting in that consultation document, highlighting as big issues for feedback from the community.
Just concentrate on the resolution here. We'll go back on the discussion. Any further questions for?
I'm just going to, sorry, fear of not sticking to this. Just something that Quentin raised. The rates are going up. We keep talking about because of Three Waters. Doesn't matter where Three Waters were, the community was still going to have to pay for it. So whether it be rates or being paying to a separate entity, so we need to feed it in. We need to keep mind of that, and the community needs to understand that this is not something. A new expense. It's an expense that was there. It was always going to be there. It was just a matter of who was going to be claiming it or billing it for it.
Any further questions? None at all. Recommended motion for us. Thank you. And Vicky, second that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you, team.
We take
Yeah, so that's the same. I'm just going to do the meeting for about 5 minutes. Sorry. Take that jacket. Item 3, organic, yes, page 72 of your papers. Simon.
I'll head straight over to Sophie because hard work.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your consideration of my report and the tabled report and the attachment, the organics business case. So we undertook a very thorough options analysis to select and recommend a preferred option for the collection and processing of food scraps and green waste to avoid that material being sent to landfill and to reduce associated biogenic methane emissions. So the key decision today is focused on seeking approval of the recommended service option and agreeing that the timing and the costs of that service be included in the draft LTP for consultation. So currently, more than 50% of our curbside rubbish bins is organic, made up of food scraps and garden waste. And a key focus of our strategic documents, the Waste Minimisation and Management Plan, our Climate and Biodiversity Plan, and New Zealand's waste strategy, Te Reo Taka Parry, is around ways to reduce and divert waste at curbside and reduce organic waste going to landfill. And to make a step change in achieving this, we need to implement a curbside collection of organics. So the preferred option consists of a combined food organic and garden organic. The acronym for that is FOGO. You'll be familiar with that if you've read the report. And the service be an 80-litre bin collected weekly. This is an 80-litre bin. And in the report, you'll see a kind of size comparison with your existing bin service. That this bin would be delivered to all service eligible properties, so consistent with the rest of our curbside collection services, and that the material that we collect in these bins be transported to a proposed new Central Otago District facility, due to be operational in 26-27, and then on implementation of the new FOGO service, that we would reduce the refuse collection to fortnightly, given that more than 50% of the refuse is organic and could go into this bin. So implementing the new service will meet our commitments in those key strategic plans. It will meet government's proposed service requirements and targets, and it will align us more closely with New Zealand's waste strategy goals and direction. So open to any questions or feedback from the work that we've done today.
Questions, councillors?
Yeah, thanks for your work on this. Can you just, so are we tied to the Central Otago facility, or is the possibility that we would have our own organics processing? Is it some sort of digester or composter or something?
In the business case, we looked at all the possible processing options. So we looked at those separately to how we would collect the material. And the preferred option was to go with Central Otago to their new facility. So there was a whole bunch of analysis done in the business case why that would be the preferred option, rather than establishing a facility within our district, whether it be a very simple technology or right through to complicated AD plants. So we looked at all those options, and the preferred option was to jump in and negotiate an agreement with QLDC to access this.
What happens to the end product?
So currently, QLDC collect their material curbside and send it to Timaru, under contract with their whole of waste service providers. And then when their facility is, and so that then gets used mostly in an agricultural setting for the wider Timaru area. The proposal is to do a pretty simple technology. So windrow composting of all the gathered material from QLDC and QLDC, and then that available compost be used commercially and domestically.
Now, I understand the bit about the cost of this additional service, but the bit I didn't understand was, and I apologise if I missed it somewhere, is the reduction of level of service going to red bins every second week. What's the saving, service saving to ratepayers on reduced level of service on refuse?
Not as huge as we would hope, because you kind of think that we're going to save lots of money, but a lot of the money is tied up in having the available infrastructure to manage that material. So obviously not sending a truck around every week saves some money, but you still have to pay for that truck to be available in the fleet. The main savings come from the actual disposal savings and the levy savings and the ETS savings that are avoided at Vic Flats landfill. So, yeah, that's where the majority of the savings are made, albeit not as dire as we would like.
And what was the quantum of that?
So
Sorry if I missed it.
that's all right. No, it's deep in the business case. The avoided disposal costs estimated to be $29
Per household? No.
so on a service, an annual service cost. No, wait a minute, is that right? Yeah, avoided disposal cost $29. The cost, it's hard to describe the differences.
I don't think we baked in a reduction from our contract of collecting the red bins, so that is a benefit that could still come. We're assuming it's going to be negligible though, due to the need of having that fleet.
So hypothetically, it could be minus $25 plus $83 or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
The 83 includes the avoided disposal costs.
Yeah.
Right, that's already built in, so they'll be saving from that.
But it would have been.
But it is a reduced level, a significant reduced level of service.
Well, you're introducing a new service that
Yeah.
enables that balance to be struck.
Okay.
And it was pretty
just-
hard for us to estimate what the savings would be of not running your collection truck as frequently. And so we wanted to be more confident in what the savings were, which were very attributable to what we won't be sending to landfill.
Okay, so there is an opportunity as we work through procurement that potentially will be able to generate some savings that we haven't considered in the business case, but we don't think they're a safe bet at the moment.
I mean, I appreciate that having the number of bin trips doesn't halve the cost, but you know, it should be quantifiable that the number of truck visits, the number of, you know, hypothetical bins, volumes, you know, should be quantifiable. But a number of comments have been made about this bin isn't big enough for its purpose, particularly if you're introducing garden waste. Did you consider any other options around reconfiguring the existing bins? Like, for instance, my glass bin is rarely full. I could easily use that as my glass bin and the blue bin as my green waste or whatever.
You don't live in Queenstown.
Well, I was going to say some people drink a lot more wine and beer than I do, so you know, and that might be a unique problem. But
sure, so we've looked at a wide range of service provision, both in New Zealand, which is limited to about 10 councils that deliver an organics collection right now, and a whole heap of combinations overseas. And what we're proposing is not dissimilar to the frequency and the size that deliver you the outcomes that we want. So there was a lot of work in looking at all those variables, how frequent you collect the different bins to give you the outcome that you want. Specifically playing around with the frequency of the glass bin or the size of the glass bin, we haven't done, but we have looked at in context with the refuse and organics and what will get the best outcomes.
I think it's important to note as well that if we did look to change the size of the glass bin, there would be a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
So our glass bins at the moment have the blue coloured lid, which is glass. Organics is going to be green.
Yeah,
so there's trade-off between both. What we do know is that people tend to not fill up their glass bin, which is fantastic. They fill them right up to the top. They're really, really heavy, and the trucks can struggle to lift them. So it is a bit of a trade-off, but appreciate your comments regarding the glass bin.
The proposed the of bins and frequency is, I think, the same as what Christchurch currently deliver.
And the point of the standardisation is that there'd be more consistency across the country around how these services are delivered.
Correct.
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thing about the bin size that we're proposing here. What we're looking to do is maximise how much of the existing organic waste in the red bin is going into this new service. We're not looking to bring in new green waste that's got an existing diversion path, either on property or elsewhere. So that's part of the focus is why we're trying to keep this bin size as small as possible.
The more green waste we put into a curbside collection, the costs will increase. And that green waste isn't currently in the red bin. So we're trying to, yeah, it's like what Simon says, divert what people are putting in their red bin and is going to landfill by their red bin into this.
Thank you. So if CODC experiences challenges with consent or construction of the facility, what does that do for QLDC's timeframe to deliver on this? Or is there a stopgap potentially until CODC can build the facility?
What we're hoping for today is agreement to progress those conversations with CODC and get a really clear MOU or a more clear understanding of where they're at and the risks associated with delivering this service in those timeframes. So we haven't had those in-depth conversations with CODC, and that's the next stage of this project. If we agree and it is agreed to in the LGP, that we start doing that.
Just a comment, I think Simon and I have mentioned, I mean, yeah, CODC are the preferred solution. They are not necessarily the only solution. So we would, until we conclude an appropriate arrangement with them, we'd be open to other alternative providers in the similar sort of game. But they may not produce exactly the same outcome, but it's something that we need to keep in the mix.
Just following up on that, so am I correct to say we're looking at 26, 27, but the actual law says we've got to have it done by 2030.
So the proposed mandate is by 2030, but we've already indicated in our WMMP and our CBP prior to any government targets that we were going to do it sooner.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go Nikki and then this and Gavin and Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering about, like, obviously places like Milwaukee. So we're going to have a bin, and we've obviously got the other our local composting set up. So with something like this, is this going to impact the way we look at ongoing funding of something like that, and supporting the idea that we will do small schemes in small spaces? Or so that's one part of the question. The other part is, are we going to monitor the impact of this on that local composting impact too?
I think there's an opportunity to consider the local version, but at this stage, the proposal is that we deliver this service to all eligible properties. And once we get a bit more understanding of what that might look like on the ground, we aren't looking at setting up any individual hubs anywhere else.
I just wondered if we could look at excluding, and I don't want to, you know, in some ways I'd be happy to, I don't have any green waste, do one in mine. I'm kind of happy to subsidise the whole thing, but at the same time, you look at the scheme that we've got going in Milwaukee, which includes a pickup by bicycle of bins taken locally, and they do all the cardboard and so on. And just, I do have concerns that we will stop funding and supporting and driving those local low carbon outcomes in favour of the one size fits all. And given that Milwaukee is under 1,000 people, I just wonder, and that was where the mandate was going, whether there is room for some exemptions. So I'm not going to try to ditch over it, but it does concern me, and I do wonder if we can be more nuanced.
So we've still got to work through the detailed procurement strategy. So there are some opportunities around those. I think at the moment, the decision in front is around a consistent universal service. There's obviously complexities as you get into community-run services that we'll need to work through the pros and cons.
Okay, so we will do that with full like community consultation. We'll be talking to local communities about.
So consultation is probably a dangerous word.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Obviously, the service is going to be consulted through the LTP.
Yeah.
We're going to need to consider the full suite of aspects as we come to procure the service. Who's best to do it across the board? Are there any nuance within the district? From an officer point of view, managing these community services can be quite challenging. It's something we need to bear in mind. We need to ensure that we have continuity and consistency of service, and so that will be resolved through contract and procurement in time.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. So this is more just for any public watching. So the business case showed that the best preferred option of going through to Cromwell or Alex, wherever it's actually based. Is it based in Cromwell or Alex?
Current site investigations are in Alex.
Okay. That the carbon emissions related with the trucks going back and forth was still a better option than any other option that you have. Is that correct? Well, you may not.
The savings in terms of the emissions are associated
Yes.
with the landfill and not landfilling the material. There is a relative saving that you can make through distance in your truck, but it is small comparative to the overall emissions savings that you make of getting that material out. So in general, what's considered 100K in transporting your material isn't material, excuse the bad way of describing it, in your emissions savings.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
No, I'll go Lyle and I'll go back to you now.
Yeah, so a couple of quick questions, and I think might have been covered by Nikki. I was wondering whether is it the intention to apply this collection across everyone who currently read
Just all the existing curbside services.
because I also wonder whether there might be an opt-in or opt-out option if you compost at home already, but
Unfortunately, we've considered opt-in, opt-out for all of those services at various points that we've been reconsidering them, and it becomes an affordability issue for that service for everybody. It's also quite costly to manage a service of an opt-in, opt-out service, and at this stage, we believe that everybody gets the standard service, and if you choose to home compost, great, but you will be eligible for that service.
now that's 50% organic waste. Is that purely taken on residential waste that you collect under the council contract, or is that the landfill?
No, the 50% is on the composition analysis that we do on curbside bins. It's over 50%. We do it every 3 years. We did it at the end of last year. What it means for the material coming out of Victoria Flats landfill, we currently QLDC sends about 38,000 tonnes of material, and we're talking about saving 5,000 tonnes of that through implementation of this service.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I thought in my mind the hospitality businesses will generate a lot more food waste than
so we're not delivering a service to the commercial sector, but we would anticipate that when a provider is operating within our district, that they would look to explore that as a commercial service, which is the same model that we take with all our other curbside service.
Right. Has there been any exploration of contamination of the existing services, putting things in that shouldn't be there?
It's always a challenge, contamination in any of those bins of wrong material going in them, and we've got a really, really strong program around telling people how to use their bin, how to use the service, and what to put in what bin. So it would be, we would be rolling out a very significant engagement campaign to ensure that the right stuff goes in the right bin, not just this bin.
A couple more, but would there be any green waste items that would be excluded, similar to the green waste collection at the transfer station where they don't take grass?
It would be dependent on what the end service looks like. At the moment, the QLDC collected material is quite broad. It's a big range of material that doesn't have as many exclusions that we have at the transfer station. So it would depend on who's collecting it and what they can receive at that processing facility.
And just finally, I guess my main stumbling block is another bin on footpath, because there's already lots of them out there. And they do create an issue. We've discussed it briefly. So I think there is some work underway, has been for a number of years, about a bylaw that covers when bins can go out and have to be back in by. I think it would be important that was in place before another bin is added to the mix. And the last point would be that the 120 litre bins can be quite low, and I'm just wondering the 80 litre bins are even smaller. Wheeling them down a long driveway could be hard work.
It's the
that's the solution.
Well,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to your rigorous process and everything, I just want to confirm that you have considered the option of a gate contract with a private contractor, because as we know, there's an entity applying or about to apply for a resource recovery park beside the Victoria for the landfill. And that would be a place where they could set up to do that, they tell me, and they're associated with the one doing Selwood. So I just want to make sure that you talk to people like that, outfits like that, and consider that, because that would be a lot better than going through Alexander, because there's uncertainty around that one too. I know you're saying here council-owned slant outsourced operation, but it doesn't indicate whether you've talked to this entity that's looking at doing the resource recovery park down there.
So before staff answer, I think we can answer in the principle of the thing, we cannot answer in the specifics.
Oh, okay, but well, have you talked to any private?
Well, yeah, as I say, we know the most about the CODC option at the moment. We remain open to any outsource.
So number 4, the resolution number 4, CEO, you mentioned that doesn't close the door then on other options, looking at other options.
Yeah, we'll commence negotiations with CODC, and as we do that, we'll know more about their solution and the certainty. If other things come up over that time, but we will have no commitments until we enter into a commitment with CODC, and we'll keep our eyes open and ears to the ground over that time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't surprised because the Morrison report, the business cases, I read bits of it, but it's very complex, and I would have thought that the business case they would have looked at things like. Anyway, I'm not. I'll leave it there.
Mel?
Mine was just reiterating Q's point about the glass and how much consideration that was taken to keeping that at fortnightly, given that most people put it out every 6 months maybe, and I get it that you don't want it completely full, but is there, because there would obviously be some cost saving / carbon saving not having that route every single fortnight, you could even go to monthly. Was that?
Yeah. So think about the suite of services we have at the moment. We have a weekly collection for the red rubbish bin and alternating fortnights for the mixed recycling and the glass recycling. If you were to push one of those services out to a less frequent service, so for example the glass, then you're not actually going to achieve any true savings, because we're still going to have the same number of fleet and we're potentially going to have the same number of operators. They're just not going to be doing anything in that period of time where they're currently collecting either a mixed recycling bin or a glass bin on the district. So it sounds like we would save money, but the reality is we are unlikely to have any savings in this scenario.
So when we go to the weekly and fortnightly, how does that then play out? Because I do get it at the moment where you're maximising.
So the simplest way to do that would be we'd have a separate fleet of trucks for the FOGO, which we would need to do anyway. With the current rubbish bins, then you could do that by utilising the fleet, but have it on alternating weeks for the different side of the hill. So for example, this side of the hill could be this week for rubbish, the other side of the hill could be next week for rubbish. So you're actually achieving your savings there by having still a consistent service, but reducing it, rather than having the whole district collected this week and nothing happen next week. Sorry.
It's not your, it's more because I get it when there's 2 and it's fortnightly, but then once 3 and it's fortnightly, that changes things.
It's a different fleet between the cycling streams and the red.
So if you think about the mixed recycling and the glass as one fleet, think about the organics as another fleet, and think about the rubbish as another fleet, then it kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Lisa Rivera, you got anything? I've got a few. First one, 180 litre, not a 140. So considering we've got 2 140s already, would you save cost on just storing and supply?
So I think we did answer that before. When we go out through procurement, we may find that the commercial collectors come to us and say, actually, there's going to be significant savings in going with the 120, which we'll need to consider. 140, consider that at the time. The drivers for the size is around maximising division.
The other one is general waste every 2 weeks. Did the business case look at smell and vermin and all that?
All the smelling stuff.
In your weekly.
So I'm talking about, like, but you don't put meat in there, do you?
Meat?
There's meat going there? Wow.
So a number.
Oh, you know, those plastic trays, you know, with the.
A number of councils are moving or are already operating fortnightly refuse collections. It's not unusual, and managing that through having an organics alternative, and then people using that for the smelly stuff in their bins. So
It's a prize that you've got.
it's not that unusual now across New Zealand for a fortnightly refuse collection.
Okay,
We don't want dead animal carcasses in our here, but if you've got a leftover drumstick from your chicken, absolutely.
that's right.
What about just like a hoof and
Okay, Lisa, that's just one more, Nikki, and then we'll move on.
Just to that point on the size of the bin, I think isn't that partly because we're trying to keep some of the existing services here, like we don't want all our green waste going out of the district. We don't want people to necessarily fill up a huge bin, and that wasn't my actual question. I just thought that was part of the discussion.
The real priority is to try and keep households doing the good stuff they're doing already.
Exactly.
They're managing their green waste on their property. That's fantastic. Just keep doing it.
The question I had was around procurement issues, and I don't know if there are any, but to Lyle's point about, yes, we've got our mind open and we're keeping our mind open. Should we be putting something in the resolution around that, just to note, because this does look, and I don't know what the procurement issues are, Jeff's not on the line. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, but I wonder if we should.
Yes, it'll be consistent with our procurement policy and guidelines as we go through that strategy.
So just
We've
wonder.
got to start from somewhere though.
I just wonder if making the resolution compliant with our procurement policy and guidelines is important.
Wouldn't everything be under that though?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It reads as though we've closed our mind to other options, even though we haven't. I don't know whether we need to keep an open mind, but if we need to keep an open mind, I think we should write it in somehow.
I think we always need to keep an open mind. That's what our procurement policy says. Whether we need to write it in, I'm just trying to think of some words as I'm talking. So give me a couple of seconds. What do you think about that, Devin?
So maybe this is Sophie just for a good point of my ear. It's important to recall that we are working towards having reciprocal agreements with CLDC at the moment, where we process their recycling through our future MRF and the reciprocal around organics. So it's an important relationship for us to bear in mind.
And one of the elements that CODC are exploring in the development of their composting processing facility is getting ministry co-funding for that, quite significant capital funding for that. And that regional approach would give us a greater opportunity for them to get funding for their.
Hang on.
Just a really quick one to follow up on that though. How dependent is the CDC progressing their facility on us contributing waste to it? It's probably not a question we can answer. Okay.
I was just going to say, I mean, the fact that there are circumstances may mean we depart from a normal tendered procurement process because of those partnership agreements, and there's a process by which you do that, a procurement plan that would be authorised under our current procurement policy. So yeah, I mean, we can't just throw the gate open if there are specific reasons why we would depart from that.
And you're right, the procurement policy will allow for those sorts of departures. Are there, if council is of a mind, you could simply amend 4 by adding, noting that any final service procurement will need to comply with council procurement policy. Should be given. And I think that covers exactly what both Councillor Gladdy and Councillor Smith are saying. Options remain open. There's an opportunity to continue to explore the reciprocal relationships we have.
We've got the motion for us. Now, we've got an alternative motion that was forwarded through at this stage, or well, if that hasn't been brought to the table at this point, I mean, what we've got is this, and if council is of interest to add those last words, unless I think you sent through something, unless you want to.
Well, I was wondering if I don't know, sometimes we've sent things through and it's been, well, that's the intent anyway. And so my concern was, well, one around governance. It's still in early stages, the CODC thing, and I just wanted the infrastructure committee to stay on top of those things so that if we do get a statutory requirement and CODC is in trouble, we know early enough and we can switch. So I didn't want to leave it, given some of the stuff that's been going on recently. And the other thing was just around consultation. I think as it's written, the recommendation sounds like it's a done deal. It sounds approve the new service will commit, to commence in 2026, 27. I think point 2 also could sound like it's a done deal, and yet in the consultation part of the report, it says that it's of high significance and that we'll be consulting through the LTP. And so I just wanted to make it clearer that it's not a done deal and that we will be consulting, and that the consultation is meaningful, because we've clearly not, we've approved a preferred option for consultation, but we haven't decided to go with it yet because we still have to consult through the LTP. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not, yes, and I think we heard from Sophie that the intention was to consult on this through the LTP. So I think that's been shared. Whether you want that written into the resolution, I think is somewhat moot. I think that's certainly been the intention of staff.
Does it say that in paragraph in point 35 under the consultation process that the business case has got more detail on specific interests and impacts of persons and intended engagement approach? Sort of feel like we're stating the obvious.
Well, it's just the resolution.
Hang on. So
under consultation process, paragraph 30.35, it does say that the business case will look at the specific interests and impacts, and it's got all those stakeholders in there, and talks about having an intended engagement approach with them all.
We note in the minutes that just confirm that consultation will be undertaken through the LTP.
Yeah.
Then that would cover it. And but my point around.
Well, I was just going to say that the preferred option and provision for estimated costs is included in the draft here, please.
But somebody you could do it that way.
Yeah, but
I was just going to say that the ones that Councillor Glading sent through, I'm happy to support her in her addition to 3 and 7, and also Mike's addition to the policy issue. So
that would be good.
if that it says 3.
Okay, hang on, we'll just formalise this. So we'll put the addition, so someone can move. Can we get those up on the screen, please, Noel?
Thanks.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 is the recommended motion here. Got the alternate there.
Okay, so
so it's not an alternate. Oh, I'm sorry. So well, I understand, Councillor Smith, you're saying
delete the change to 2. So it just reads as normal. Include the change to 3, which subject to consultation under the LTP, which it is, and then that they report 7. They report remove 6. The change to 6 because it will only happen if it's progressed. It's some unnecessary wording. Happy with 7. Delete 8 and include whatever Mike wanted. 4.
That any final service procurement will need to comply with council procurement policy.
so. That's at the end of 4. Yeah.
You don't like 8?
Well, it's unnecessary, I think.
It's just the terms. What I was concerned about was the terms of any.
Hang on. So we add to the end of 4, noting that any final service procurement will need to comply with council's procurement policy. So I take it you're moving that?
Well, if
yeah,
okay, yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Do I have a second?
Yeah,
awesome.
Well, you fight over it, so Nikki second. You didn't even get a chance to.
It's fine.
Right. Okay. Got it there before us, councillors. I think we've had a pretty good discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate your enthusiasm, Sophie.
And it was a long rigorous process.
I'm glad it's not full of waver.
Okay, item 4, standing orders, page 170 of your papers, councillors. Good afternoon, Niall. Take it away.
I'm sorry, I didn't print the props. That's
well.
Don't get
and what the prop would be for standing orders.
Stand up.
I'm largely happy to set that report as read. There were just two things I wanted to signal beforehand. A suggested amendment or question was raised by Councillor Glenning yesterday with regards to an inconsistency with our intent around public notification of workshops. Taking that on board and circulated to everyone earlier today, something that we proposed to include in the table of proposed amendments under 6. So just to read that out for the record would be to amend Appendix 11, workshops, to read public notice of workshops will be as per Standing Order 8.1 public notice ordinary meetings.
Pretty straightforward.
I won't butcher the today in a public meeting.
Questions, councillors?
So it's consistent with the intent.
Questions?
Sorry, just before the other thing I wanted to note on the paper, with regard to the amendment to 12.8, under the Local Government Electoral Legislation Act, when we had the discussion around the changes to standing orders late last year, that was fine, and that act had been enacted. So that comes into being from the 1st of October. So what we're proposing here is all fine and dandy, one better phrase. In December of last year, a private member bill did come forward into the House, which is known as the Local Government Facilitation of Remote Participation Amendment Bill. So that effectively supports what's already gone through in this Act, but does, if it comes into being, enable councils to unwind the provision for quorum through their own local standing orders. So that's only just come in and is at its first reading. So that may go nowhere, but just kind of signalling that there is a potential further act to the LGA. If that does come through, we'll bring that back to you to consider if that's something you want to provide for.
Thank you.
But apart from that, have a second.
Questions?
I do have a couple, thank you. Thanks for that change. Yeah, I was just wondering, there seemed to be another consistency that I thought of this morning on the way in actually, was the meetings were obviously required to give councillors papers ahead of time. But there's no requirement for workshops, and we've talked about it in the past, you know, trying to get papers ahead, and sometimes they arrive on the morning of, sometimes they arrive the night before. So I just thought, given that we're going public, and you know, to me one of the advantages is that we're more prepared potentially. I think there should be some sort of requirement to have papers to councillors. I was thinking 2 days ahead, but open to discussion on that. But I just wondered from a staff perspective what your thoughts might be.
So, Chair, so through the process of thinking about how we prepare and roll out open workshops, that's actually something that we have taken into account. And I can't remember whether you may have been absent when we discussed it previously. We've certainly talked it through with staff, and the position that we're taking is that for consistency with the approach that we have for formal meetings, papers and sort of covering workshop sheets will come to elected members 4 working days ahead of workshops, and will be publicly available on our website 2 clear working days.
Okay.
The kind of caveat that we put around that is, given the nature of workshops, particularly if it's, say, for example, related to a long-term plan or financial matter, there may be late legal papers, late audit papers. So the intent from a staff perspective is to, where possible, provide as much material as we possibly can. But I guess there's a chance that there will be by exception, and it's been made very clear to staff in the rollout that the intent should always be to get stuff out those 4 clear working days and 2 working days.
Would you object to formalising that in here, just as it is for the minutes? It's just, I'm aware that things change when they're not formalised. If it's formalised, and I don't mind the exceptions, I'm sure that could be worded, but would that be something that you would be able to put in, given that's the intention?
I mean, it mirrors our
I think it's a little bit unfair to ask an officer.
Maybe
It's up to us to decide that, not for the officer.
So, well, it's just from a practical perspective, it doesn't, that's, I suppose you've highlighted the issue that it might cause, and I guess we can work through that in the wording. So that's fine, I don't need to ask that question. The other one I had was just around the public excluded discussions. So we don't record them. And sometimes the minutes that we have are quite brief because we seem to be following a less is best approach. So given that we need to sort of be releasing publicly excluded stuff at a certain point in time, there isn't the same level of information there for important public excluded items as there is for others. So I just wondered if you've given any consideration to the recording of one way or another in some detail of public excluded items.
Not as part of this process, and certainly the steer that I've sort of taken from the wider council, from staff and from the mayor is that recording isn't a place we want to go to right now for PX.
I think the key thing is we're not really like the recording more because it's a PX item in the minutes than we would for any other item.
But I guess from my point of view, we have a recording of the other, so you can always compare the minutes with the video and get that detail from the video. But with PX, some of the most important things we're considering is looking at the arterial review. Unfortunately, Dave Bresh can't go back and look at what was discussed and what was said. You've just got some very brief minutes, and to me, it doesn't protect council, it doesn't protect the decision makers, because there isn't that level of detail. And I just wonder, I'm not talking about making it public immediately, but I just think I would add a level of transparency around our most, eventually, when we can release things, around our most controversial subjects, and it would allow us to learn down the track and protect councillors and staff down the track, because we have a complete record. So yeah.
I'd probably
no comments on that?
I would probably comment that just because they're PX isn't because they're controversial. They're PX for a raft of specific.
Yeah, that's true.
reasons. So
But
it's not because they're
sometimes,
controversial. That's not a reason. Yeah. Any further questions?
I mean, only that I support the idea that having a complete record of something is worthwhile. And I think the example that has just been given around the arterials is one that Gavin and I spoke about on the phone yesterday as well, where, you know, all you've got is your own notes and minutes in it, and it's kind of helpful if there was a recording, if we want to reference anything from a governance point of view. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Councillors? Okay, we've got the motion before us, so the recommended one, 1 and 2. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Bob. Seconder? Thank you, Matt.
I'd like to propose an amendment.
To the motion or to the standing orders?
To the motion.
Okay.
So what I was thinking was we could but we need to get 75% across, so you know it may not go there, but I just want to give everyone the opportunity. I thought we could include add clauses to standing orders to the effect that workshop papers are required to be with councillors 4 clear days ahead of a workshop, and you may want to word subject to specific exemptions or some such thing, given Niall's comment. And the other point was discussion on public excluded items must either be recorded or minutes taken, and I had taken from the Ombudsman's report, sorry, that minutes reliably contain a clear audit trail of the full decision-making process, including any relevant debate and consideration of options and how individual elected members voted. That's straight from the Ombudsman's report. I would prefer a recording, but either would be better than what we have at the moment.
Sorry, I was just checking now that we do certainly record minutes, as you know, and in the event where a public excluded item can ultimately be released or the information be released, we always consider that. So that's where you will always see a statement can be made by the Mayor or Chief Executive.
Right, I'll amend that. I'll make it simpler. That discussion on public excluded items must be recorded,
minuted,
recorded, audio visually recorded, just as an option, because it.
So repeat that again.
I think we want to look at that. Sorry to join. I'm thinking about whether there are some implications on that. It's something we might want to just take away and consider.
But I guess the point is that we
record. Sorry.
Well, I can speak to it.
No.
I'm thinking about legal advice, frankly, and in the event that there is a recording that exists, it becomes something
Yeah,
that's discoverable.
Right.
So, that's the only concern I'm thinking of.
So we've got a mover, but we haven't got a seconder. Do I have a seconder for what? Okay, no seconder. We'll move on. So we're back to voting on 1 and 2. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? No one. Motion carried. Okay, thank you. Item 5, CE report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So you'll take the report as read. Specifically, you'll note the noting the purchase of 189 Valentine Road, so the facility and the land over in Wanaka. Noting the appointment of Councillor Ferguson to the hearing panel for Project Manawa. Councillor Wong has raised that point earlier and there is to speak to that. You'll note the approval of recommendations from the Wanaka Uplift Community Board relating to a number of reserve matters. And just to draw to your attention, and because it's in the body of the report, but there's no specific recommendation, the exercise of the delegation around the closure of Mount Iron for 3 afternoons earlier this year, as a result of the application of our wildfire closure policy. So that's just to draw your attention to that.
Thank you, Chief. Do you want to?
I just wanted to add some context for full transparency on that one point that concerns the conflict. So I've been a board member of the Queenstown Business Chamber of Commerce since 2021, and prior to becoming a councillor, been made aware of a perceived conflict of interest due to the Queenstown Business Chamber of Commerce submitting on the recent Project Manawa consultation. I'd like to address the council by stating that I was conscious of the potential conflict and as such had taken appropriate steps to mitigate these by removing myself from all board discussions and submission process regarding Project Manawa, with the exception of being present during an early briefing to the Chamber Board by QLDC representatives. I remain unaware of the Queenstown Chamber's position in their submission on Manawa until that submission was made public in December. I have agreed with the recommendation of the Mayor to step down from the Project Manawa hearing panel to uphold the integrity of the consultation process and to ensure that any perceived conflicts are mitigated. Thank you for letting me do that.
All right, questions?
You mentioned in your thing that there's only been one, this is a meeting, we had a very important meeting on Tuesday.
I apologize, but that was before.
Paragraph 3, the only meeting to be held so far in 2020.
At the time of writing my report, the only meeting held as was, yes.
Don't worry, Lyle, we know
You're a hard taskmaster. You're a hard taskmaster.
There was another thing in this, what was it? I'll have to come back to this. Oh, no, it was. To do with the Valentine Road purchase. It's good that we've got a paragraph there, especially paragraph 15, considering what you read in the paper this morning, some criticism by Dunedin councillors on purchasing Forbury Park with no real purpose for it yet, and how they suddenly came up with $13 million. So yeah, at least we're buying, we've got a reason for it, and we are justified with buying it.
Thank you all.
Both waves are getting pretty close to.
Okay, I'll go. Nikki, again.
Thank you. Just a query about how we decide on who we appoint to panels. I know we're making the decision at the moment, but how the name gets put onto the agenda. So wondering what the process is, just generally.
Also, as you know, generally we don't put names on the agenda. We normally call for panel members, and normally that's done by a vote. We had established the panel in this instance. When Councillor Wong had discussions with the Mayor regarding his continued role, then I had further discussion with the mayor, and the suggestion was, that councillor Ferguson be added, in lieu of councillor Wong, so it's.
Oh, no, yeah, I understood, like I felt like that was where it went. I guess for me, I think there should be some sort of process around how we do that, because I think it's quite important. It's quite important that we get a spread of people and different people, and that everyone gets a say in how they have it. So you may say it's now, but it is very awkward to say, no, I don't think it should be somebody. It's very different to sit there coming from an open perspective and, you know, not having made that decision and say who would like to be on it and have that discussion at the time. So look, I just.
So which as I said, that's our normal process. If you recall, normally when we set up hearings,
but not always.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
I say most of the time, but in all instances that I can remember, we've had appoint XXX 3 members, and there's been a discussion around the table about who those 3 members might be.
Yeah, I can't look. I've seen it happen both and multiple times both ways. So I just wonder if it's something we need to have a think about and sort of formalise the process so that it's never seen to be people selecting a certain person for a certain role, because I think that can impact the integrity of the process or people's perception.
Hang on. Are you suggesting councillor Ferguson is not up to the task?
No, it's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that there can be a perception when people are selected for something, and given that the normal process is to come into the room and just say who would like to do it. In this case, it might have been Councillor Long is no longer on the panel. Do we have somebody who will put their hand up? So I'm just saying it would be good to have consistency around that, so that there's never that.
I think that in this instance, there's also a question of timeliness, because if you recall, the hearing's actually out on Monday. So there was a need to ensure that we had somebody, someone could be briefed, someone would be available. So that partly influenced the process in this instance. Okay.
Just a super brief comment about the Gunai enclosures is that they were based on forecasted conditions that didn't largely eventuate over those 3 days. And now we have the sensors and real-time information in place. I hope our system is adapted to be more responsive to those actual conditions rather than the forecast conditions.
Well, obviously we're continuing to refine the process. Having the when we finally accept the attendance system, that will certainly be an additional line of information to enable us to format. We will, this was the first year this process, we'll continue to refine. It is very labour intense on staff. It is very demanding on staff to do this, and so we'll actually be looking to adjust how nuanced our approach will be as well, because it's incredibly demanding, and some of the responses and pressures that staff are put under when they endeavour to make those calls were actually quite tough as well. So yeah, I think we'll learn and we'll use technology, and but we'll continue to take a safety first approach.
Okay. Any further questions? Well, I'll move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Barry. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you, councillors. Right. I make it 3:27. I declare the meeting closed.